Join Carol Davies on Global Voice Radio, the host of Only the Best for You. Be a change maker and unlock the secret to your best life.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Global Voice Radio show, Only the Best for You, here on Global Voice Radio. My name's Carol Davies of the Passion Motivator Coaching Company, and I'm really pleased to share with you the best information and speakers on how you can be a change maker to make the world and yourself the best you can be. Today, I am so pleased to be interviewing Holly Wade, who is also one of our wonderful Global Voice Radio hosts. Holly Wade is a holistic health and life coach with 25 years of experience in the fitness and wellness industry. Through her own personal struggle with anxiety, depression, and Crohn's disease, she knows firsthand the toll that stress takes on a person. Her passion is to help others reconnect with the wisdom of their bodies. Holly has a master's in athletic administration and is also a master trainer for the World Groove movement, and she also teaches yoga and meditation. She just loves salsa dancing, getting outdoors, and her morning coffee. She is a regular contributor to We Are Beautiful magazine and hosts a radio show called Living from the Inside Out here on Global Voice Radio. She's quite a dynamic person, as you can see. So she can be found at her website, www.hollywadewellness.com, or on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Hi, Holly. Thanks so much for being here today.
Thank you, Carol. I'm so pleased to be here. Thanks for asking me.
Great. I'm excited to have you here because you've got so much experience and background in health and wellness. When I was, reading some of the things that you've talked about and all the interesting things you put out on the internet, I was just amazed at the depth of knowledge and experience you have. So I was wondering, what prompted you to get involved in this area of wellness and health coaching?
Well, I started in college as a freshman, and my entry point was to become a group fitness instructor. I'd always loved being athletic. I loved dancing. I loved moving my body. I was an athlete in high school, so it was kind of a natural fit. And it was something that I fell into, honestly, and was quite good at it. And then that led into personal training. And through that, I thought I knew about my body. And it was about that time that I started having digestive issues and some things coming up that really were symptoms for Crohn's. And my dad had it. So that wasn't anything that I was a stranger to. But it also made me go, ooh, that's not what I want. And so that led to some different exploration of what my body was telling me. Because I knew how it functioned. I knew textbook, how I was supposed to build it up and create a machine. But the fitness world, that's how it looks at the body, is as a machine. And it's a very linear progression that we're all supposed to be athletes rather than really building on health, which is more dynamic and fluid in that our bodies are dynamic. Our bodies are fluid. They change every single day. And so that was a missing component for me, was really learning to understand those little signals. And that sounds for some people, very foreign. At that time for me it was, but I really couldn't distinguish between being hungry and being thirsty. And I think that's pretty common for a lot of people. We're so disconnected from our bodies. We're go, 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 do, do, do. Oh, it's time to eat. Oh, I've got to do this. Oh, I forgot to eat because I was so busy. things like that. And so it's sometimes just the most simple signals that we don't recognize. Well, digging in deeper, I found a naturopath and really had to unpack the emotions that I'd stuffed. I was a people pleaser and a perfectionist at the time, and that's a pretty deadly concoction. So the tension in my body mixed with eating a low-fat, no-fat diet, because that was what we were buying into as healthy at the time, and sometimes teaching as many as 5 classes a day was creating so much inflammation in my body, not to mention the stress of being in school, finding a job, all those things that for that stage in life. And you can replace the stressors, throughout whatever stage of life you're in. But what I really learned is that food, lack of sleep, and that stress creates inflammation in the body and our emotions, which is a lot of times the stress. And when we can figure out what is creating that tension in our body, we often figure out it's something in our life that's mirroring that back, or it's an internal something. And then we can work backwards and take care of it.
I so agree with you, especially when you mention about the stress and the emotional component, because myself, I do a lot of work with clients with emotional issues, and wellness and fitness comes up a lot, but it's that emotional thing that I think, especially in North America, we're taught, and you mentioned that about the go, 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 and you've always got to do your best, and in fact, you've almost got to be, better than everybody else, and have such high expectations, and we just forget really how to live. So, in a sense, what I get a feeling from you is that you working with your clients, you sort of work with them to relearn how to live in a healthy way. And it includes fitness, it includes eating, tuning into your body and your emotions. But it's, as you said, we are not just one dimensional, we're many dimensions, and it's body, mind, and spirit. And that's what I find so interesting about your approach, is that you found this almost on your own, but your body was telling you, and this is several years back when it wasn't, quite as in fashion as now. Right. So in a way, I think you must have been a bit of a trailblazer.
I really, throughout that process, I recognize many people around me who were kind of going through the fire at about the same time for a reason. Because I think fire is a really good thing. Fire is what refines us. And by going through that, yes, we were the ones who became the trailblazers. We're the leaders now to reach out and say, hey, I've been there. And I feel like we all have this calling, this first wave, so to speak, of people to really embody this, not just to learn it textbook, not just to go out there as, I call them the false prophets in the online world, but to really create change, to really help people genuinely and sincerely, to reach out and say, hey, you can master your own body. You don't have to have a healer. You just have to have a teacher to teach you how to do this. And that's really the approach that I take. And that's what I see so many people doing now. It's that, yes, we were called into a healing, we're called to be healers of some kind. And to me, that isn't so much that it's my job to fix people. It's my job to empower people. Because we live in a time where healthcare costs are ridiculous. And people are one emergency away from bankruptcy. or losing, whatever the case may be. And that adds to the stress that we have. But what people don't realize is that there are so many things that really, they tell themselves the story of, ooh, eating healthy is expensive. Ooh, if I do this, it's expensive. If I do this, it takes too much time. If I go to the gym, that's too much time. And the reality is it costs us very little. And it really isn't as difficult as we have been programmed to believe. And I believe that it's harder to unlearn the old way of doing or believing something than it is to learn the new habit. It's the letting go that's hard, because we cling so tightly to our habits, to our beliefs, to our safety net, so to speak. And that's really what it boils down to, is that letting go piece, to step into something new and different. That takes courage. That takes bravery.
I so much agree with you, because doing what we've always done is a way to be safe and not to have to take a risk or change, because as you said, change is frightening.
Yeah.
So if we want to make some, major changes in our life, be it our eating habits, or maybe, there's a few personal habits that we want to change or get rid of, it's really helpful not to have to always do it on your own, but to with like a coach or with a mentor, or even like a support group. There's many ways you can go about it, but what you're saying is you really have to have that feeling of, I need to change. How can I do it? But how can I do it in the best way for me that's not overwhelming? And that's, I think, an approach that both you and I share, in that when we work with clients, we sort of take them by the hand and work with them as part of the team.
Yes.
Is that sort of your approach?
Absolutely, because we have to meet in the same place, or we have to meet in that common ground in order to create the results that they want. We have to work together. Like, if I'm the only one working, it's not going to happen, because they have to be the one to do the work on their own. But if I'm not giving them enough tools or resources, then I'm not setting them up for success. And if I'm not there to say, hey, I'm here when you are in the midst of the struggle, because it's not when you're on the call with me. So text me or call me when you are in that struggle. And that's when that's where that support comes in. It's when we have to put what we've learned into action. And it's just like any other skill that we've learned. I believe relaxation is a skill, as an example. But it takes time for people to learn that, to relearn that, to feel comfortable with it, because it is something that we've learned to replace that with go do, feel stressed, feel like I need to be doing something. And so it's a really foreign kind of feeling. So that's an example of what we might work on or work through. If it's about food, if they get caught up, or they're like, Carl, I had this the other day and I just felt awful after. Well, that's a great opportunity to talk about that. I'm so glad you paid attention to how that made you feel, how that impacted your body. So what did you learn, and what will you do differently? And how can I help you? Let's make that plan. And I just think that that's the place where people are set up for success, is when there's someone in your corner, someone who's lived it and knows those challenges. I have helpers still. And I'm guessing that you probably have your mentors as well, or as one of my friends used to call it, your own board of directors, to help you with various things in your life.
I so can relate to that, because there's always been a whole tremendous amount of people living inside saying, do this, do that, which I guess you could call the board of directors, but I think a lot of that stems from, programming that we receive as young children or growing up. I'm talking about the Western society we have in North America, because that's what I grew up in and that's what I know the best. And there's all these, voices of do this, do that, don't do this, don't do that, that you take that on and that becomes part of your person or persona. And all of a sudden, maybe when you're an adult, suddenly things fall apart and you don't know who is this person, who is me.
Right.
And that is a very scary feeling. And that, I think, can be at the root of a lot of people who, they have depression, they have stress, then they reach out to inappropriate things to try to numb that, because we're taught not to feel. We're taught not to, speak our truth. But, when someone says to you, oh, how are you? Everybody says, oh, I'm fine. And inside you might be screaming and hurting, but you're always just fine, or everything's great. And I really find it amazing when I work with clients, as probably you do too, when you get to that point and the person can feel safe to finally be honest and say, you know what, my life is not working and I need to find a different or a better way. Right. And that's for them to be a success. To be a success doesn't mean making a lot of money or being the best at something. It's really living your life in the most authentic way for you. Yes. That makes you feel great as a human being. Yes. And then you can contribute all the strengths and talents you have out into the world. But if you're depressed and stressed and, focused inward with the pain, it's that pain you have to address. So I think wellness for me takes in a lot of that. It's, healthy eating habits, and it's the, getting emotional balance and time to have fun in your life. And in fact, going on your wellness journey can be fun.
Absolutely. I'm a big fan of play in your body. Play in it. That's what we get this body and we get this amazing playground called the world. Play, explore, be in it, have fun in it. It's way better than fighting it.
No, I agree. And what is the sad thing? I don't think maybe as much now, but certainly when I was growing up, the idea of having fun and play was foreign. I mean, if you had a little bit of time each week to devote maybe to a favorite hobby, or maybe you were able to play tennis or golf or, something that you really liked, that was okay. But you didn't say to people, I'm going to have some fun and make my life better. It just wasn't that way. So to have to unlearn that sort of programming, it's hard. It's not easy.
Well, I was having this conversation with my mom this morning, and we were talking about, when you grow up, your family means well, but you are limited to that understanding of the world. And then you go out into the world and you've been told, within that context of your home, you've been taught certain things about yourself, or about how people relate, or about finances, or about whatever it is. But that is your first impression of the world. And so you don't know different. You don't know what you don't know. And then you get out into the world and it's like, oh, well, maybe I'm not that. And maybe this isn't real. Or, oh, maybe my family is like, the shocker for me was like, oh my gosh, my family is dysfunctional. Realizing that when I was in college, and to some degree, I think every family is, but, to understand that at that time, I was like, oh no, now what do I do with this? And so I think that's part of the shock, is that when we have these other frames of reference and we try to put ourselves in that, it doesn't add up the way that it used to. And it's kind of, it kind of stuns us a bit and creates those questions and that distress, that response of stress where we either fight, flight, or freeze. So I think there's a lot of things playing into all that. And I would agree with you in that we're not taught to play. We're taught to achieve, we're taught to whatever the case may be. And maybe even in some instances as kids, you were told, oh, don't laugh. When you were laughing and playing, it was like, oh, you're too loud. And so you learned that play isn't appropriate, as an example. And so these are all things that, when I said earlier, I think it's the harder part is unlearning or deprogramming those kinds of things than it is to replace it. And when we learn that we can give ourselves permission to do different, our family or the people that raised us are bad people. They did the best they could. And now I can do different. And that's all okay.
It is so true because our families are very important, and the way they brought us up, their beliefs and whatever are important. Mm-hmm. But we have to remember too that our parents did the best they could, and they were raised in a certain way.
Yes.
That maybe I don't understand, you don't understand, but they dealt with the programming their parents gave them, and a lot of them came out of society that was very touched by war, depression,
yes.
Economic things, and they lived with a lot of fear. So they became, a little bit more rigid in their outlook perhaps than we are now today. And it's so different to what you see. And it was really interesting when you're talking about your mother, because it brought to mind my own mother. She's passed away a few years back, but for the last 3-4 years of her life, she had a mild dementia. And it didn't affect her too much. She looked still like she was functioning and pretty normal, but she just couldn't, look after her finances or whatever. So she was in a group setting, but quite happy. But what happened was she lost her social filters, the things that she had learned, from her parents and whatever. And it was really wonderful in a way, because the beautiful human being she was came through. She was loving and giving, and she was considered a real asset in the home where she lived, because she became the sort of unofficial assistant to the activities coordinator, because she was always going around looking after some of the ones who, were a little bit lost, because, when you have a bit of Alzheimer's or dementia, some people get affected worse. She was still fairly high functioning, but she had such joy in life, and she would come up to you and she said, "Oh, I have to give you my hug for the day." Everybody got one, and a big smile. And then towards the end, she passed a little quicker than we thought, but she was always saying to people about my sister and I were twins. She said, "I'm so proud of my daughters." Now, she never said that when she was, quotes, normal, but when it was like something was lifted from her, you saw the real human being.
Yeah.
And that, I think when you said that, it is possible, but it's so hard to unlearn.
It is. Well, we've put on so many masks, and we've buried ourselves as a way of protecting ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And so taking off those layers feels quite vulnerable. And when people question what you're doing, when your people closest to you question your new way of doing something or being something, it kind of rocks your confidence a little bit. And it is a new skill. It's like learning to walk. And while those people mean well, it's also, we have to remember that, as an example, when I first was trying to heal my gut, the very first thing I was taught and practiced and started to implement was no flour, no sugar. And keep in mind, this is before gluten-free stuff was available. So it's a little more of a challenge to find things and to create a diet that supported that. So when I was coming home for Thanksgiving or Christmas, that was challenging for the rest of my family. You know, what are we going to do? What's she going to eat? And to try to educate them, it wasn't so much about me as it was about them having to realize, like, oh my goodness, we have this spread and now there's nothing. And that was hard for me too. Actually, that first year was like, well, what am I going to eat? And then empowering myself to just contribute things and knowing that I had something that I could eat. I had things that I enjoyed, or to contribute to the menu or make suggestions, so that everybody could enjoy them as well. But it's hard. It's hard when you are kind of bucking the system that you grew up in. And what we have to remember is that as we're creating changes in our lives, it's raising questions in other people. And so the response to you really isn't about you. It's generally their own emotions coming up of feeling like, well, gall, if she can do it, can I? Or, you know, things like, well, what's so wrong with the way I do this? You know, they're going to be asking themselves these things. And that's normal in the process of growth and change. And eventually we find a middle ground.
Yeah, we do find the middle ground, I think. And it's when you get to that point that life feels better again, because usually we're going through a process of change. We get into a fairly bad place, because if you want to make a change, then that means that you realize that something isn't right in your life, or you're hurting, or something has you off balance. And I think if you are listening to yourself and your body, it could be physical symptoms like you described about, you know, the stress, or some people get, as you said, digestive problems, or, I mean, you could even contribute towards heart disease and other things. So that if you realize that you don't want to go that route, then as a person, it's sort of your responsibility to take charge of your own life, because it's nobody else's really responsibility except ours. You can't say, because the doctor didn't see this in me, or, you know, my husband or wife didn't, you know, X, Y, and Z. It's you make the choice. You make your life. And some people just don't want to take that on, because that means, in a way, like they say, we come into the world alone and we go out of the world alone. But while we're in this world, we're part of it. And that's where we keep trying to connect with people. And doing that through, you know, a health journey or a wellness journey, I think it's so central that if we make ourselves a priority, we will do the things for our body that is the best. Eat the best way for us. Get the exercise we need, the sleep we need. Try to reduce the stress. And it's, like you said earlier in the conversation, you need to make the time for that and recognize that it's so important. It's almost more important than anything else. And it's more important than making a lot of money and being the best, because if you don't have your health or other things,
anything,
you don't.
Because it's robbing you of your life.
Absolutely.
It's robbing you of your joy. It's robbing you of the possibilities of the things that you can do in your life. It's robbing you of your purpose.
Yes.
And you know, so there are cases where it's just part of the deal. You know, there's no explanation for a child, as an example, at least not to my rational mind. There's no reason for a child to be sick other than to be a teacher for us to be compassionate.
Yes, for sure.
And I'm not a fan of everybody creates their own disease, because a child, I don't believe, created that. However, as an adult, I have conscious choice. And as I know better, I can do better. And you made a comment earlier, and what that brought to mind is that once you see the truth, you can't unsee it, and you really can't go back. So once you experience that truth in your finances, or that truth in your health, or that truth in your relationships, then you stand in the power of choice. And people are afraid of that because that's not something we're taught. But it really is a powerful place to be, because that's when you have all these choices. And that's when you can recreate your health. That's when you can heal relationships. That's when you can work with your money, or whatever the case may be that's going on in your life. It's when you can choose to leave your job that's making you miserable.
Yeah, and you can choose maybe to get that training in something that, if you take the time to say, well, what am I really excited about? What would I really like to do in life? And, maybe you're in a profession or a job that doesn't suit you. Well, there are always choices. Maybe you can't quit your job, but you could take, maybe a night course, or
Right.
you could do some volunteer work in an area that interests you, to find out, like sort of like dabbling your toes. You don't necessarily go jumping right into the pool, but you can sit on the edge and just sort of see how it feels. And then when you feel ready, you can go and jump in. But change does not have to be frightening and abrupt.
No.
It can be little tiny baby steps, and finding out really what you're good at, what your strengths are. That can be as empowering too, because that gives you the courage then to say, look, I know I need to change. I'm not eating well. I'm not sleeping well, because I'm doing this and this, that maybe I just need to say, no, I'm not going to do that anymore. Or maybe there is a friend or two that you don't need in your life that's bringing you down. It's hard, but maybe say, look, maybe I need to take a break from that relationship for a while. Could be a friend, it could be a loved one, but change definitely is not, as you said, easy. Not at all.
No.
Not at all.
No, I say that we have to be warriors for our health and our life, because it takes courage. You have to put on that armor. You have to be brave to stand up for those two things, because no one else is going to do it for you.
That is right. That is so true. I mean, you have to be your own advocate and your own best friend, because they say that there's three people inside of us. It's me, myself, and I. So there you have not just you, but you got two others there that you feel you've got your own little team going on, which, you can have your own internal cheering section when you do something.
I love that.
Like, let's say you made a thing that you're going to write down every day what you're eating. And you do that, and then you notice over, say, a week, that suddenly the choices you're making are a lot more healthy. You're not eating as many sweets. You've decreased the amount of salt, and you start thinking, I'm starting to feel better too.
Yeah. And once you feel better, then that's the incentive to continue. And sometimes we feel worse before we feel better, because we have to purge kind of the gunk that we've had in us, that we've fed to ourselves, mentally, emotionally, physically. And so there's a little bit of a detox that has to happen. And that may be physical. It may be like you're just exhausted for a few days as things are changing inside of your body. And that's a part of the process, but it's okay. It's a part of the process. It does get better. If you think about the transformation of a butterfly, that caterpillar goes into a cocoon, and it is not a gentle process. And some really magical things have to happen while that metamorphosis is taking place. And then here it comes, this beautiful butterfly that has wings and if you can kind of keep that illustration, at least that was one that helped me in some of the harder times in my own journey through this transformation, because I really do say it took me over 20 years to get a PhD in myself. But when I hit those struggles, if I could just think about that cocoon and what had to take place in there and just realize, yeah, it's dark. Yeah, it's tense right now. There's a lot going on. But man, when I could break through that pattern and get that new pattern down, wow, life really was much easier. And then the next thing cropped up. And then, wow, okay, things are in sync again. And then the next thing cropped up. Because that's kind of how life is. We're, as you said earlier, we're not one-dimensional. And so it's kind of like as we get stuff, at least in my life, this is how it worked. It was kind of like as I got things into alignment in one part of my life, then it kind of showed me where I was out of alignment in something else. But the skill set is very similar with each process I've found, and it gets faster to get through it as you recreate those relationships with your body, your health, your life, your social relationships, seeing what energizes you, what sucks the life out of you, and renegotiating based on some of that information.
It really does, because when you say it takes a period of years, I think back for quite a long time, for about 20 years, I carried a lot of extra weight on my body, and I didn't feel good about my body. I mean, I managed in life and this and that, sort of stuffed it aside. But then, about 3-4 years ago, I had a few health issues develop, and I wasn't able to eat that much because it upset me and whatever. And all of a sudden the weight really just started disappearing, and quite a bit came off, and it stayed off. And I thought, I feel like the person I was, 25 years ago, before a lot of problems came up. And I think what I did was I put that weight on my body without knowing it, because it was sort of safe. It was keeping me from having to be hurt, sort of a protection.
It's a protection. It often is. People emotionally eat for a reason, which I'm not saying that's what you did, but that's, there's a reason for emotional eating, and there's a reason for hiding or protecting ourselves from being hurt again or being hurt in that same way.
I agree, because once I had, trained to be a coach, I started seeing these things, but even then, it didn't happen just because I quote myself thinking, oh, now I'm enlightened because I know more about the process of how to help people, and that I still wasn't able to help myself until sort of a life crisis came up. And it's like you mentioned in your own life, things had to change, and I just had to accept that. I was just grateful some days just to be able to eat. So,
amen, sister. Amen.
I started eating, the better things.
Yeah.
And enjoying them much, much more. So not to say that I don't, still have a piece of cake or a sugary drink. Not as much as I used to, but I enjoy, the simple things again. Just being able to eat a simple meal. I feel still good after that, it's such a pleasure and, something to be thankful for. And I think it's finding that gratitude in life for when you do have good things going on. That's very much a part of the wellness too.
Absolutely. I hit my crisis point about 4 years ago. And I'd had, crises I guess I would say the crisis was when I had my Crohn's disease, when I got that diagnosis, and it was like, oh my goodness, okay, it's real. And in looking back, I really missed out on my 20s because of the illness and because of not feeling good and having just being fatigued and trying to figure out what I could eat and just a lot of things. And when I look back at pictures then, I actually look so much healthier now. And in the course of, mid-20s into now, that was the whole journey into doing different and learning to re-eat and all those, or learning to eat differently and exercise differently and focus a little more on mind body rather than the hit it hard and creating more inflammation in my body. But 4 years ago, I still ended up spiraling downward. Like my body would not keep food down. And physiologically, what ended up happening was that scar tissue inside my gut was so bad that 4 areas of my intestines were completely shut. Air couldn't even pass through. So no wonder I couldn't keep food down. But I kept being told that it was in my head. And, when surgeons pulled my intestines out and took a look, the beauty is we know exactly where the strictures are, and we'd never been able to find that before. Now we know where everything is. And the encouragement for me is that what's healthy is super healthy. And what was sick, or what the sick part of my intestines, had been sick for years, probably since high school. That scarring had started way back then. And it's like a scar on your skin. It's not going to completely go away, no matter what you do. And I was able to just release myself from the guilt of what had I done. Yes, there are things that I could have done differently in my life had I known differently sooner. Like I could have learned stress relief back in high school instead of living with anxiety. But I didn't know. And the gift in all of this is that I really stand firm in that the lifestyle that I've created for myself gave my body what it needed to survive at a time when, I was maybe 90 pounds when I went into the hospital. And the doctor even said, you got here just in time. And that's kind of a wake-up call. You're like, whew, even though I'd done all these things right and didn't get to be the poster child for natural healing, it sustained my body, and my body did everything in its power to do what it does best, and that's to keep us alive. And the gift of God, I'll use that term. You can use universe, whatever you use. But the gift is that I knew it wasn't my time. And this is what I'm called to do. Because we don't have to suffer. And for the first time ever, about a year after my surgery, my gut could restore. I was sitting and I realized I feel zero pain. I'd always had a dull ache, but it was my new normal. Even though I was awake and conscious and aware of what my body was doing, that was my normal. So I didn't distinguish it as pain. I don't know if that makes any sense. But I realized for the very first time in 20 some years, I felt zero pain. And I'm in all these groups with people, well, in a group with people with Crohn's and colitis, and I don't have an ostomy bag. And I am living vibrantly. Like I got the gift of really getting to have my life back. And I really do think it was the dance that I got to do with learning different, with creating a different life, along with the people that God placed in my life to give me these tools, the new understanding of my body, just all these things that came into my life, I stepped into. And now it's like, okay, here was the opportunity to separate from your career so that now you can help other people to do the same. Not that they have to leave their career, but that I can empower other people to be vibrant regardless of what condition your body might have, that you don't have to be enslaved to that.
No, I think you've really summed it up very well. We all go through maybe a very difficult or dark time, but if you persevere and go through that, you go out into the light.
Mm-hmm.
And it can be a physical feeling, it can be a spiritual feeling, but there's something there's because you've gone through pain and hardship, there is also a reward for that.
Yes.
Which is your health.
Yes.
And to me, wellness is all about that. You know, having a healthy life, balance, good relationships. And I think you know, as a holistic health and life coach, are in such an excellent place to help other people, you know, on their journey.
Yeah. Well, so often we only look at our health from the standpoint of the physical body, in terms of going to the doctor. And there's something to be said for the numbers that they're going to look at. There's something to be said for the habits of how we eat, how we move our bodies, and how much sleep we get, because all of those things impact how our cells regenerate. Our cells also function off of emotion. And there's a little DNA strand inside of every cell in our body that is holding on to that memory. So we will literally hang on to emotion unless we set it free. Mm-hmm. And that stress that we learn to live in creates an acidic environment, which breeds bacteria and viruses. It breeds illness. It breeds disease. And so when we start to look at our cells and understand how they function and what helps them to regenerate so that we can feel good, there's this dance between our body, our soul, and our life that I think that gets to take place. And we can really live in that freedom and in that space of joy, that we can enjoy these bodies that we get. Whatever shape, whatever size, whatever gray hair, whatever cellulite, it's all the way it's supposed to be. Like that's a part of the deal. We're supposed to have lines and cellulite and gray as we get older. And somehow we've been told that that's not the way it's supposed to be. And so we get into this frenzy, but we can relax into that. And I've just learned that if we embrace joy first, our body will change. Everything else will change if we start on the inside and let that start to glow, let that light start to shine and radiate, and let that sparkle come from the eyes and that smile show up. That's where the real change takes place.
I so agree with you. And I think on that positive note, I'd really like to thank you so much for taking time to be with us and to share the knowledge and wisdom. And I'm really hoping that our listeners will find some great takeaways and nuggets from the discussion, you know, we've had today, because it's true. Life is a gift. Life is meant to be full of joy, and it's just wonderful that we have, you know, wonderful people like yourself to help us along that path. So remember, if you want further information from Holly Wade, please go to her website, which is www.hollywadewellness.com. And if you want other further information or other ideas of things we've talked about today too, you could contact me through my website, www.thepassionmotivator.com, or by email at coachcaroldavies@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. And remember, as Holly said, you can change your life at any time and be the success you really want to be. So bye for now.
Tune in every Wednesday at 12 p.m. Eastern for Only the Best for You with Carol Davies on Global Voice Radio.